The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right, hi everybody, and welcome to our first pro user webinar. This is Lauren. You might recognize me as Lauren Salad on the forums, and we're really glad that everybody could join today. What we're going to do, just to explain a little bit the format of how today's going to work, is we're going to go over, it's going to be a 1 hour total presentation, or it's as close as we can get to that 1 hour time frame. So it's going to start with just a straight presentation, and we're going to go through in-app and then tables after that. During that time, you're welcome to submit questions, but we won't be answering questions during the presentation time or between. What you can do is you'll see in your GoToWebinar interface, you'll be able to see an area to submit questions. Feel free while the presentation is going on to type up questions. After the presentation is over, there'll probably be about a 15, maybe 20-minute section at the end where we go through, and I'm going to moderate and read some of the questions aloud. So type them in throughout the presentation, and we'll answer them at the end. Just a couple of quick notes about questions is make sure when you type them up, just so they're easier to go through, and make sure they're in as full and complete sentences as possible. Know that it's, or if it's something not on topic, just do your best to keep it on topic, and we'll do our best to keep it in and make sure you get the information and get it answered. Also, another note is I won't be reading anybody's names. It won't be like this question comes from this person. We want to protect your anonymity and keep everything fair. Last note, we've also started a forum thread, so after this is over, you can go through and ask more questions and discuss the presentation there. And without further ado, I am going to introduce Billy Garretsen. He is the manager of GameTeamOne. That's our internal game development team here at GameSalad, and he's going to be walking you through all of the awesome features. So take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren. I'm going to just jump right in, and forgive me if we kind of go a little fast. I want to try to leave as much time for Q&A at the very end, so be sure to enter in any questions as they come up. So a lot of you guys might be really familiar with the iTunes Connect dashboard here. This is before you even jump into GameSalad to start messing with in-app purchase. It's probably important for you to set up a new app on iTunes Connect. So we're going to go to Manage Applications. I've actually up here called Pro Webinar, and again, some of you guys may be familiar with a particular screen. But until now, you probably haven't really dealt that much with in-app purchase. So what we'll do is we're going to go and set up some items on the Apple side. So the first thing you'll see is no in-app purchases have been set up. So the first thing you'll do is create a new one, and then you get a list of types of items that you can buy. For the time being, GameSalad only supports consumable and non-consumable in-app purchases. So a consumable would be something that you could purchase a quantity of, and then you would consume them through gameplay. So this would be something like currency or like potions, something that you would buy, and then in the game you would consume for some sort of result. And you could continue. You can continue to buy these items over and over. So a non-consumable. Sorry, guys, we had an audio issue. Let me repeat that real quick.
Muted.
Sorry.
A consumable item is something that can be purchased over and over again, versus something that's a non-consumable is something you purchase one time, and this would be something like a one-time content unlock, like unlocking all the levels or adding a new character. Something you would do once. So real quickly, let's set up a consumable. So we'll select consumable. Reference name is just is not public facing. This is something for you to just kind of, you know, be able to organize your items by. So let's say we want to set up a coin bag that has the quantity of 100. So I'm just going to call this one coin pouch 100. Actually, already had one set up here. Product ID. Now the product ID is the most important part of this particular setup, because the product ID is the value that you're going to actually put into GameSalad, and that's how your game will talk to Apple servers at runtime. So for this particular one, I'm going to enter this product as in-app coin IAP coins 100. And then I'm going to add a language. By default, I'm just going to put English. Display name, we're just going to call this bag of 100 coins. And this is what the user is going to see when the prompt pops up during the transaction. The display description is adds 100 coins to your pouch. So we save that. And then this next part, your pricing and availability, you can open up this pricing matrix because Apple does all the currency conversion for you. And so what you'll do is you'll skim this matrix and kind of figure out how you're going to price your item. Most times things are going to be in smaller increments, like 99 cents or $1.99. For this particular thing, I'm just going to put it at tier 1, which is 99 cents. But you be the judge of how much you want to charge for your in-app purchase. So the last thing you have to do to set your item up on the Apple side is to submit a screenshot that shows your in-app in context. This is not a public-facing screenshot. It's mainly just an image that helps Apple to know how you're using your in-app purchase, so that they know you're not abusing the service. So I have a screenshot here from a demo game that we're going to show off in just a second. So once you've uploaded your screenshot, hit the save button, and apparently the product ID has already been used. No big deal. And I purchase coin demo 100. That is a unique name. All right. So the most important part is to have a unique name here, because that really is how Apple is going to communicate with your game. All right, so that was a consumable item. Now let's go and set up a non-consumable. The process is pretty much identical. So we'll just say full game unlock. And the product ID for this one's going to be IAP full game unlock demo. Add language, English, display name, unlock the full game. Unlock full game. Display description, get all the levels and all the goodies! Exclamation. And then for this one, because it's going to have more content than maybe the consumable item, I'm gonna charge $2.99 for it, which is going to be price tier 3. And again, you be the judge of how much you want to charge for your in-app purchases. I'm going to just, for the time being, I'm just going to choose the other screenshot that I had before and save. So now I've got 2 in-app items set up on Apple's side, and now we are ready to show off how to integrate this into your GameSalad game. So I have already created a game file here, a game project that has a few things set up, mainly like art and whatnot. But what we're going to show is how you can add coins to your wallet and how to unlock all the levels. So here you'll see at runtime these levels are unlocked and you can't access them. So first thing you have to do is you have to make sure that you have some game level attributes that are associated with your unlockables. So for instance, the coin pouch is going to add a quantity of coins to my game attribute for total coins. And let's say in this particular game, I can get coins from gameplay, or I can just buy them outright through in-app purchase. The other attribute that I have set up here is a Boolean attribute for is game unlocked. And that's essentially the flag that multiple actors are going to check throughout the game to make sure that if this is checked true once the purchase is completed for the full game content, that those levels will unlock. So I have kind of a, let's see here. I have not created any buttons for making purchases. So the first thing I'll do is I'll just kind of create some dummy buttons here. This one will be the button for unlock full game. And then I'll make another button here that is add coins. Right, and just for the time being, let me just mock these in here so I know that they're there. All right, and when we're done with that, you won't even see those white boxes. So let's go into unlock full game. So what I want this button to do is on press, I would like to trigger the in-app purchase item for the full game unlock. So let's go to the Pro behaviors, drag in your in-app purchase item. All right. So if you haven't seen this this behavior before, it's actually, you know, it's got a lot of familiar fields. Like I said before, the product ID, which is that top field, that is the most important part, because that's how you link this particular item up to Apple's server in order to make a successful transaction. So let's go back real quick just to make sure that I have the naming correct. All right, so IAP _ full game unlock demo. That's what I call this product. There's a number of ways that you can reference the product ID. You could reference it from a self attribute, a game attribute. You can reference it from a table cell as well. And I won't show that particular feature right this second. We'll get into tables a little later. But for now, I'm just going to manually enter in IAP _ full game unlock demo. All right, this particular item is not a consumable, so I'm not going to click the consumable checkbox. So the next field that I'm going to edit is the change attribute field. The attribute that we want associated with this is the game unlocked attribute. So what'll happen is as soon as the player clicks this button, it's going to trigger the in-app purchase event, and then it's going to talk, and then your game's going to talk to Apple. And then if the player decides to buy your item, then what's going to happen is your game will automatically change is game unlocked from false to true, and any associated triggers based on, you know, whether or not your game is unlocked will then become activated. So if you had levels that were locked off, they would then become accessible instantly. So, and then after that, this behavior automatically saves that value. And we'll get into saving and loading in just a second. So that's pretty much all you have to do for the very basic functionality of in-app purchase. So there's a couple of additional fields here: success scene, cancel scene, and error scene. These are completely optional. You do not have to specify any of these particular modifiers. Though we do give you the option to each one of these that is specified will automatically pause your game and fire up any other scene that you specify. And then through an unpause behavior, you can return back to the original screen that you triggered the purchase from. So I actually do have a few scenes that are already set up here. So on the success scene, I'm going to trigger my IAP _ success custom scene that I created. And on cancel, I'm going to fire off the cancel scene, and then on the error scene, I'm going to fire off the error. So we'll jump into a consumable item here in just a second, but let's just see what this does. So I'm going to turn off the graphics. Now let's fire this up. Okay, so once you trigger an in-app purchase event in the preview, in the preview mode, we show you a in-app purchase stub. Because your game is not, you know, published out, it won't connect to Apple servers from preview mode. So we do try to give you some helpful tools, though. So this stub will allow you to simulate a success event, a cancel event, and an error event. So just to show you how those other scenes work, I'm just going to shoot off an error event. So you can see how, you know, you're giving your player some useful feedback with these optional scenes that get shown. But what's really important here is that we show that on success, we have a few things that were on the main menu that were associated with the game is unlocked attribute, and now you can clearly see that those buttons are now accessible. So let's back out and let's set up the coins behavior. So in this add coins button, we're going to do the same thing. On push, we want to trigger the in-app purchase behavior for the coin pouch. And this is IAP underscore, what did I call it? Coin demo 100. Coin demo 100. And for this particular one, we are going to click the consumable checkbox. And the attribute that changes when this is triggered is the total coins integer attribute that I have at the game level. And here, it's just going to change to a hard value of whatever it was before plus 100. On this particular one, I'm not going to put any success, cancel, or error events up, just because it's kind of a less valuable, less meaningful purchase. So we don't want to like break the player out of gameplay. Really, that's a decision that you can make on your own. So let me turn the graphics off of this so we can see what the art looks like. Okay, so we'll see here. At runtime, I have an actor that's got a display text that shows what my current level of coins is, and so I have another hidden button here that I can just spend a random amount of coins, or I can click the Add Coins button, and then on success, you'll see that that value jumps up by 100, and I can keep doing this over and over again, and then I can go and I can spend, and I can keep buying. So, and then we can go back and unlock the game. Now people are just spending money left and right, and that is good. All right, so that's not the end of your in-app purchase setup. You still have to consider how you're going to save and load for future play sessions. So I don't believe I have any. Let's see here. Technical difficulties. I'm pretty sure this is going to crash. That is no bueno.
Lovely.
Yep. Okay. No big. All right. So luckily, like any chef would, I actually have a fully baked copy of this project that has everything already set up. So what I'll do is, just to save time, I'll jump into what I ended up having to do in order to make sure that everything was saved and loaded. So, as I said before, in the non-consumable in-app purchase, you automatically get to save that attribute when that purchase is successful. So all you really have to do in order to make sure that that purchase is maintained through multiple gameplays is to include a load attribute behavior somewhere in your initial scene that uses the key for the unlock game product ID as the key, and then is associated with your game level attribute for is game unlocked. So that one's pretty straightforward. The one that's a little less straightforward is your consumable, how we actually save and load that. So in-app purchase does automatically save the value of your total coins at the time you make a purchase, but due to the nature of it being a consumable item, you're going to be spending that currency throughout your gameplay. And so what you wouldn't want is you wouldn't want your player to come back on subsequent plays and have their previous kind of a coin total be altered in any way. So what you should take into consideration is if you ever have an event in your game where you make a purchase or you do anything that changes the value of that total coin count, that's where you need to include a save attribute that uses a custom key. So rather than use the product ID for your in-app purchase, you're going to use a custom key that won't be repeated anywhere else. So you're going to, for instance, right here, I just I called it total coins, which is different from the product ID, and so it won't get confusing. And then also in the purchasing event for the coins, I included a little timer offset that also replicates the save attribute behavior that uses the same total coins key. So if we look at this now, if we play this game, I can spend coins, I can add coins. And then if I reset the game, the value stays, the value is persistent because my saving and loading is firing off at the right time. Then I can go, I can buy this thing, thank you for your purchase, continue to add coins, and then I'm just going to keep resetting, keep resetting, keep resetting. You'll see that the game is properly saving those attributes associated with your purchases. All right, so the last thing is, again, it's an optional feature you could add to your game, but it is best practices just for the best consumer experience to include a restore purchases button somewhere, maybe in your options menu or somewhere off to the side of the menu. So you'll see here there's an in-app purchase restore item action behavior that we've added as well. And this is something important to remember. Apple will only allow you to restore non-consumable items. So this particular behavior only applies to non-consumables. So what you'll do is, you can add as many of your items as you want in this one behavior. You don't have to have multiple behaviors. What you would do is you would essentially copy in your product ID here, much like you would in the purchasing behavior, and then specify which attribute to change, and it'll work. It'll open up a communication with Apple, and based on the player's login, it'll determine whether or not they have indeed made a purchase previously, and anything that they have purchased will come back as true and will automatically unlock. So that, in a nutshell, is in-app purchase. And I would suggest anyone, I kind of tore through that, so anyone who has any kind of deeper questions on the feature, please go ahead and submit those, and we will be sure to consider them in the Q&A portion of this. All right. So the other really compelling feature that we've just added is tables. I'm actually going to create a new project here. You'll see even from the home view, we've got a new interface here that includes a new tables tab as well as a tables drop down nav button here at the top, and that'll allow you to switch between different tables that you've created. So the first step is to go from the home view over to the tables tab and create a new table by clicking the plus button. And you can rename it here. You could also rename it from within the table. I'm just going to call this GS Test 1. So anyone who is familiar with database or spreadsheet software, this interface is probably going to feel kind of familiar. It's very easy to kind of add and remove rows and columns, and you can specify reference names and common names. So I can put hero, I can put villain, vehicle, etc. And over here I'll put mage, warrior. This is all to really help your own organization. So the overall kind of interface, it should feel pretty familiar. The one thing that you do have to do pretty custom here is the column header. Every column is going to have an attribute type, because essentially the way we've treated tables is it's just a large matrix of game level attributes that are just really easy to look at and edit and cross-reference. So the first thing you'll want to do before entering any data is to figure out, what attribute type you're going to want this particular column to hold. And you can have mixed columns. So let's say, for instance, I want this first one to be, these are all going to be integer values in this particular table, because it's essentially, this is just a stat table. But like, let's say you had quest dialogue. Is it dialogue or dialogue? And then if I switch it to text, then I can enter in, hero column, and then I am talking and having a good quest. And you can essentially just have any number of data types in a table that can be referenced later by anything with an expression editor. Excuse me, I'll take a quick sip of water. All right. So before I leave this kind of table view, I'll show you some additional kind of convenience features that we've added. The ability to import a CSV file and the ability to export a CSV file from your table. So we don't force you to generate the table from within GameSalad, and if you wanted to start it in GameSalad and then kind of refine it elsewhere, we give you that option too. So just to kind of give you an idea of how much data a table can hold and how quickly it loads it. I'm about to load in a table that contains a dictionary's worth of words. So, you know, a couple hundred rows by a couple hundred columns, and you'll see that it really takes, I think it's a second or less to load it all in. So click import, boom. So I'm just continuing to scroll down, and you can kind of see really quickly that, you know, kind of tracking this level of data would be pretty much impossible in previous versions of GameSalad. So you can import CSVs, export CSVs. Tables are really great for like card generators, random number generators, etc. Let me jump over to, I've got another project that has some, a quick demo of this dictionary in action. So I'm just going to run this. So right now, every 1/10 of a second, I am updating a display text actor to display a random cell, and I have a number of instances of this actor that have slight modifications, so they're not just pulling from the same table, they're actually pulling from multiple tables. And you see there at the very bottom, I have an update count that's keeping track of how many times we're just running like at full speed. So this is just one example of how efficient tables are for, you know, data referencing. Before I jump into any more demos, I'm going to show you how we interact with the table. So let's go to our scene, let's create an actor. And again, this is just a rough demo, so I'm just going to pull in a change attribute behavior just to show you in the expression editor. This is where you're going to interact with your table. There's 3 new table functions: table cell value, table call count, and table row count. Table cell value is where you specify the cell that you want to pull data from. Table column count will look up any table that you specify and get the integer value of how many columns it has, the maximum number of columns. And then table row count does the same thing, except it finds the maximum number of rows. So let's jump into table cell value and look at how this looks. We see a 3-point coordinate here, table, row, and column. So tables are a game level essentially collection of attributes. So what you'll do is you'll highlight the table name here in this parenthetical, and then click over to the specified table we created earlier, which I call GS test 1. Double click on that, and now we are going to look up inside of this table and then specify a row and a column. Just for the time being, I'm going to put 1 and 1. And let's create a self-text attribute here that I'm just going to call text. We're going to change self-text to whatever that cell is, and then we're going to display it. So in the display text, I'm just going to specify what self-text is. Now let's pull this into our scene and see what happens. So that should be the first word in the first row and column in my table. So let's just go over to the table and take a look. Aardwolf indeed is the first word. So that is like a hard-coded value. I'm going to kind of gloss over some of the extended functionality of how dynamic you can make this, just because I figure you guys are all pros and you guys have all used the expression editor before. But since it is an expression editor, you can use any of these functions, and you can use any attribute to pull data from a table and specify its row and column. So you can totally pull from random rows and columns, and you can use another attribute somewhere in yourself in the actor's attribute list or at the game level to also populate that field. So it's extremely dynamic, and it's kind of, it goes beyond, the amount of time we actually have to show how expansive it can be. So just to give you an idea of what the other functions do. So I'm gonna remove this expression and start over. Table call count. It's a 1-point coordinate. All you have to do is specify which table. And if I push, if I hit the preview button, what it should show is the maximum number of columns dynamically from that table. So if I go over to the table, I kind of scrub over to like the maximum column, we're going to see it's 237. That's really important if you're trying to pick a random number from the table, because what you will end up doing is you'll put down random, and then for your min you put 1, and then for your max you specify table call count and then that table's value. And so what that'll do is that'll choose a random number from 1 to 237. But like, let's say you went back to your table and you added additional columns, or you added or you deleted columns, you wouldn't have to change your logic because it's already taken care of for you. And again, similarly, table row count returns the maximum amount of rows for that table. So again, like, I imagine if you guys have questions on the specifics, we'll cover that. But before I open it up to Q&A, I would like to show you some additional demos that we put together very, very quickly for this webinar. This one here is done by Jonathan Sam, aka Code Monkey in the forums, who is the senior game engineer of GameTeamOne. And I'll give you a preview of what this is like in action. So he has simulated what it's like to be in like a dungeon crawler and open up a treasure chest that randomly awards loot, and then the loot itself is dynamically generated from a cross-referencing table. So you'll click on this, and then the first thing you'll get is you'll get a weapon, and then you'll get all the stats for that particular weapon. And so it's a little rough looking, but when I show you kind of all the data that's being cross-referenced in order to create all these kind of custom items, you'll hopefully see like just really how amazing tables really can be. All right, so you can keep on doing that, and each time you do it, it just randomly generates new loot, new items. So let's go over here to the table view. If you notice, there were a number of things being displayed each time you click the treasure chest. And so what Jonathan has done is he has created essentially a table for a certain couple of values. These are the material values. And you've got the different kind of weapons, and each weapon has essentially a set of stats. And then additional kind of magic ability stats and descriptions. And so he's showing how tables can work in conjunction in order to create pretty dynamic loot arrangements. So from a data standpoint, that particular demo just shows like just a lot of things being dynamically created on the fly. And then let's see here. I created something that's a little bit more visual, just to show how you can use tables to optimize things that you might have already been doing before as self-attributes or game-level attributes. So right now I have, I'll just show you what this is like in action. I have essentially like a shop screen that is showing multiple things being generated dynamically. First component is an equipment icon. The next component is an item name, and then an item description, and then an item price. And I have all of these values set in one table that through only 2 actors in my game that have been duplicated a number of times in this one scene, I've been able to very quickly set up my scene, and then also given myself a much easier way to edit things. So let me show you what this table looks like. So in preparation for in-app purchase, I do have a column for product ID. This particular demo doesn't really hook up to in-app purchase, so I'm not really using that column. but I am using the public name, and that's the display name that you see at runtime. The description is essentially, you know, again, the field that's displayed underneath the public name, the cost. But what I think is really exciting for folks who like dynamic kind of like graphics and graphics calculations, you can use text attributes to set up associated images. So based on a product ID, you can change the image for that product dynamically. And so here I have a number of image names associated with these items. But let me show you real quick. Okay, so great, we're looking at the screen that we saw before, but now, again, without going into any actors, I can go in and I can switch a couple image names just right at my table and click play, and let's see, that was not called green boot. What did I call that in my file? Green boot. Okay. So now you can see a couple of my images have changed, and it's just a very efficient way to make edits to your game or duplicate items and just very quickly make changes once you've set up your initial scene. And one of the biggest cumbersome points about GameSalad is kind of like navigating back and forth between an actor to preview, back to actor, back to scene view, and so this kind of alleviates some of that, some of those navigation woes. Again, there's just really not enough time to cover every single thing that tables can do. So I'd recommend, you know, keeping an eye on the forums. Definitely check out gshelper.com because T-shirt Booth's done a couple videos that really kind of show off some of the capabilities as well. So thanks to him and thanks to everyone contributing to the further education of the community. But again, I'm sure you guys have some questions, so I'd really like to open it up to the Q&A portion if we're ready for that.
I think we're ready.
Awesome.
Okay.
Can you hear like my voice is like, I haven't had enough water.
Drink some water, and I'll ask questions, and you can answer them.
All right.
Okay, we got a bunch of questions. It looks like the bulk of them are about in-app purchase. So one thing that was asked a couple of times actually was the question, are there any plans for subscription in-apps?
That's a good question. You know, that particular knowledge is actually, I don't make that call, but when we were working on it, the devs, they were talking about it. So I mean, I won't commit us to anything. I'll say wait and see. I don't know if it's any trivial amount of work to get subscriptions functioning. So sorry to dodge the first question. And again, like that really isn't something that I can answer in any capacity. You know, I mean, the kinds of questions I can answer is how to use the features we have today. So
cool. Okay, so this question is about product IDs when you're using in-app. They want to know if this is something that's the same as it is with leaderboards, where it's better to use something, you know, com.game name / company name IAP name, where there's basically, are there going to be problems with other developers using the same product ID as what they're using?
I don't think that it's like leaderboards in that respect. I think that your in-app purchases are they have to be unique for like your own set of games. So like I can have a product ID called coins, and no doubt someone else in the world is going to have coins, but I can't have 2 games of my own under my own account that have the in-app purchase coins. And again, I don't know if any of you guys have published your games with in-app purchase yet, but you know, again, like it's kind of a new thing for us too, but through Battle Edge and Infinity, we've been able to look at our stats essentially. Once you've published an app, you know, you can look at the stats on iTunes Connect dashboard, and I think the reason why they force you to have a unique product ID for your own set of games is because you're looking at all of your data at the same time across all of your games, and so I think they just track it per account, not for the entire like universal developer library. So I would say rule of thumb, you know, if your game is called Puppy Love, call it like puppy love underscore something. You know what I mean? Try to organize it as best as you can on your end.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question. So for the non-consumable in-app, GameSalad saves automatically. Do you need to use save attribute in that situation?
No, and for the non-consumable, you don't. And again, you don't. It's the best practice to add a save attribute after a consumable purchase because of just the nature of consumables. It's something that's meant to flow up and down. And so we actually, Jonathan Sam here wrote, let's go back real quick to like the subscription in-app purchase. We haven't tried this, so if someone wants to try this out, this could be a method of getting subscription-like in-app purchase without it being a subscription like set up on the Apple side. You can take advantage of the OS clock essentially and reset a certain value in your game. For instance, like whether the full game's unlocked or whether there's new content that you want to lock off after a month. You could essentially relock it after a month and then kind of force the purchase. Though I don't know if on the Apple side it'll see that user's already made that purchase. I guess you could track it as a consumable. Anyways, we don't endorse hacks. That would definitely be a hack, and we obviously can't stop anyone from trying something. But for all you guys who are concerned about making sure that your game is going to get approved, we only endorse kind of using the methods that we've described for consumable and non-consumable items.
Speaking of consumable versus non-consumable, one of the attendees asked that you could just go through a quick definition and the differences between those two things again.
Absolutely. The easiest thing to do is just think about coins versus unlocking the full game. So in my game, a consumable item is something that I can use in the game, reuse in the game. I can buy multiple times. It's just essentially it's a quantity item. So I could buy a potion pack that had 3 potions in it, right? And then in the game, I could use each one of those potions to refill my life. And if I needed more potions, I could buy more potions, right? It's a consumable item. It's something that's going to constantly be purchased and used and then purchased and used. Versus something that is a non-consumable item. It's essentially a one-time purchase, like unlock the full game for 99 cents, unlock the expansion pack for 10 new levels. You're not going to constantly go back and do those. You don't play the levels and then the levels expire and you repurchase them again. You'll always have them essentially. It's a one-time unlock. So hopefully that clears up the difference between a consumable and a non-consumable.
That's pretty good. Yeah. Pretty good explanation. Okay, let's see what else we got here.
Talk.
Does the attribute, did I already ask this one? Does the attribute for a non-consumable purchase need to be a Boolean?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that is no wiggle room on that.
Okay, there was a lot of questions about the restore in-app feature.
Mm-hmm.
So questions like, how does the user choose to restore their in-app purchase? Is it through a GameSalad button or through Apple? What would we use restore in-app feature for? Is this the case where a player deletes the app after he made a purchase with in-app?
Yeah, let's talk about the scenarios behind restoring your purchases. Again, restoring in-app purchase is your choice. You can choose to add it. Apple will accept your app if you don't include it. Though Apple recommends and GameSalad recommends that you do have a restore purchases button, mainly because it puts confidence in the consumer that no matter what device they're playing the game from, whether it's now or in the future, that they'll have access to the things that they bought. So the scenario is, yes, this person moving from one device to another device, or whether they've deleted the app and have reinstalled it. I'm actually going to pull up the project file for Battle Legend Infinity and show you kind of where we put it. That's right. Scenes, main menu. All right. So if everyone can see this, we have dynamic menu backgrounds that kind of show up. So you can't see the background just yet. But here in our options screen, we just have kind of tucked away into the corner a Restore Purchases button. And what that does is it opens up a line of communication. Actually, wait, it's going to play music. It opens up a line of communication to Apple, and using the player's Apple ID, their login for iTunes, it'll look in its database and decide whether or not and figure out whether or not that player has previously made purchases for that game. And if they have, it syncs those purchases back up with your game. So let's say, for instance, let's say, for instance, the player hasn't deleted the game, and then they go to the options screen and they restore purchases. It'll essentially do nothing. It'll open up the dialog with Apple, and it'll be like, purchases have been restored, and then that's that.
Sorry, I was giggling.
Okay.
Someone asked, can you also send us the project file for Battle Legend Infinity while you're at it?
To be honest with you guys, you don't want it. Half of the game was created before a lot of these features were added, and more than half were created kind of before a lot of these new features were added, and then the last kind of month of development was us converting everything over to tables, and it's kind of a mess. I'd be embarrassed for everyone to actually see how much of a mess the file is, and that's not necessarily GameSalad's fault. It's our development cycle of stretching development out for almost a year. I guess it was 9 months. That's just bound to happen when technology is changing that fast. So, sorry. Maybe next time.
Okay. Sorry, I was reading through questions while you were talking. So if I ask you a question and you're like, I just answered that, I'm sorry.
Do you think I answered the restore purchases satisfactorily?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we got everything in here. We've got another question that asks, what happens if someone restores...
Wait, real quick. Jonathan did point out, I did mention this during the talk a second ago, but one last reminder, as a consideration for restoring purchases, Apple will only restore non-consumable items. So, yeah, and that's mainly because of, again, the nature of consumables, where the player's going to constantly be using those coins or those potions, and so Apple can't necessarily give you back all those things for free. So it's only for non-consumables. So if your game doesn't have non-consumable items, you don't have to worry about it at all.
Cool. I think we might have answered a bunch of all those restore questions, actually. Does in-app work on ad hoc builds?
In-app will work on ad hoc builds if you have if you set up your items on Apple's side, and then using the same bundle identifier associated with the app that you created on Apple's side, your ad hoc build will ping their sandbox server. So you can test in-app purchase on an ad hoc build, but you can't use your actual Apple ID. So, like, if you as a consumer have an Apple ID, you won't be able to use that to actually test transactions made on their sandbox server. But through the iTunes Connect dashboard, you can set up test users using dummy email accounts. So I would suggest creating one or more of those. And when you've made the ad hoc build, log yourself out of your live kind of consumer account and log in as your test account, and then you'll be able to unlock items in your ad hoc build. And fully test at your game before publishing. So, to Apple.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I know.
Is there a pop-up when the user is offline and presses an in-app button?
Yeah, there's a dialog will come back if there's no internet connection and essentially no connection is made with Apple. There will be a dialog. I forget offhand what exactly it says, but I think a network error has occurred or cannot connect to the server, something to that degree. but there is a notification that that it's a network issue.
Is there a way to trigger a pop-up or give some sort of confirmation that a consumable was purchased without switching scenes? Referencing your gold coins example,
Yeah.
having gold coins was increased but might not be noticeable in some circumstances.
In that regard, you may have to do something a little custom, like right out of the gate, in-app purchase. It is pretty limited to those scenes, essentially. Now, you could have a blank scene that has essentially the pop-up placed where you want it to appear in the scene underneath it, and essentially, you know, treat it like a pause, where, like, on touch anywhere, it'll unpause itself and return back to the previous scene. I mean, you can do it that way, or you can have some sort of logic in your scene that looks for when the coin value changes, as far as it increasing, and assuming that it's from a shop screen where the player's not going to get it from in-game play. What could happen is each time that value increments, you could throw up a graphic that says, "Thank you for purchasing coins." So there's definitely a way to do it. It just isn't the plug and play built into the behavior itself. But yeah, you can totally do that if you wanted to.
Okay, got more questions.
Yeah.
Flooding in the more you speak.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Can we have in-app changing multiple attributes?
What was that? Oh, a single in-app purchase cannot. So, and you kind of, I mean, you kind of wouldn't want to, you know what I mean? Like you're going to want to associate each attribute with each purchase for a non-consumable, especially because if you have, you know, I mean, you could have multiple buttons in your game that unlock the game, but once the game is unlocked, you're going to want every other instance of that button to disappear because it won't work. Like if you bought the game and that graphic stays there, it's just going to be really confusing to the player. So I would just say, like, in terms of being a good designer, like, you wouldn't want to associate more than one item to, or more than one attribute to an item, or vice versa. So.
Okay.
But for the sake of non-consumables, you can have a ton of non-consumable, or in the sake of consumables. My bad. Tripped up. For the sake of consumables, though, you can have 100 unique items that all affect the same consumable attribute. So, like, I could have a coin bag of 100. I could have a coin bag of 50. A coin bag of 1,000, and they all affect the total coins attribute. So.
Okay, I'm going to do one more quick in-app purchase question, then switch to tables questions for time.
Sure.
Last in-app question, is there a limit to how many in-apps we can have in our game or in-app purchases?
I haven't seen a limit. Certainly haven't hit a limit on the Apple side. I've set up many test items, and again, it's like, use your best judgment. And check the Apple documentation, because I don't want to be the official word on that, but I'll say that I've set up, I think between 30 and 40 unique items without a problem.
Okay, let's switch to tables.
Sure.
Is there a maximum number of columns or rows that you can have in a table?
What do you think? We haven't seen any.
I think I've heard 1,000 by 1,000. But I'm not sure.
It's a pretty big table.
Pretty freaking large.
Well, how about this? As a rather than give you a hard value that's a maximum, understand that the bigger your table is, potentially the longer it'll take to find the data that you want. So as a best practice, if you have tables that are exceeding like the 500-600 row and column mark, maybe think about splitting that up into multiple tables, or figure out the use cases for that particular table, just so you can optimize it. But soft value would be like 1,000 by 1,000. Dustin Henry, the developer on that particular feature, would be able to answer that. And he's not with us right now, but if that's really a concern, I would say put it up as a forum question, and then we'll try to answer that later.
Yeah.
yeah, maybe that's something we can follow up with.
Sounds good. Okay, let's see. Can the table call an image that is not on the stage of that scene?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was doing. Like in that demonstration of the item shop that I put together. Those images are nowhere referenced in the actors that are pulled into that scene. They're referenced dynamically at runtime from the table. So the actor using the table reference for the image will dynamically pull in the image and populate its texture with that. So no, your images don't have to be pulled into the scene in any way. They'll just get loaded on the fly as soon as that change attribute triggers.
This question is about the random word display.
Mm-hmm.
They want to know, is the random like actually really random now in the editor, or will this file display the same, quote unquote random words if run a second or a third time?
It's completely random. Like, yeah, I mean,
it's random for real.
I'm trying to figure out how. I mean, like, I don't want to just it's random and take my word. I mean, I'm trying to figure out how we can like prove that it's random. I can pull up just let's see here. Let me go back to my tables thing. Maybe queue up the next question while I look at this.
Okay, while you're thinking about that, can you quickly explain again how the associated icons are displaying different images for different text entries?
Okay.
Are those text fields the PNG name?
Yeah. I will show that, man. I really want to show off how this thing works. So let's see if I can just do this real quick. After one copy, display. Yeah, it's okay. So let's see here. Cell value. A lot of dead air. Hate dead air. All right, so we're going to pull from a dictionary. We're going to choose a random row. Okay, so random, the minimum for my random is 1, and then the maximum is going to be get row count, because I don't remember off the top of my head how many rows this table had. And then the same thing for column. I'm going to put get column count, or random column count, son of a. And then we will specify the table. Now let's look at my parentheses. 1, 2, 3. Double check, do I look like I have enough parentheses? I think I should. All right, so let's pull this in here. Let's make sure and see my audible sound. All right. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. Take this dead air. I'm going to move on to the next thing. I apologize for wasting any time there. It didn't take time to debug that. What I was trying to do is I was just trying to display any random word at all, and then each time I reset the scene, you'll see that it's just going to pull in a completely different word each time. It's not going to be the exact same random word pulled in. It's done in no particular order. It's completely calculated at random at runtime. All right, so a lot of you guys maybe use the same techniques as we use. We have a couple self-attributes here that once we drag an actor into a scene, we can very quickly edit. So, like for instance, we have these actors that are I have an icon actor above every item in this shop table, or in the shop scene, and each one of them has an associated ID. So the first one is ID1, this value right here. Second one, ID2, and again, like that's going to go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so the logic in here, it's essentially just one thing, change attribute from the self image to it specifies using the self ID which row to pull from, but it essentially pulls from that column that has the image name. So at runtime, it's dynamically pulling in those images. So are we having to wrap it up, or what's the story here? So for instance, I can really quickly copy paste the same image over and over to like all these different fields, and then at runtime you'll see they're all going to be the sword. So again, hopefully some of that was useful. I didn't mean to stumble over that one word demonstration, but yeah, just trust us. It is a true randomization.
Okay, we just hit our 1 hour, so in respect of everybody's time, we're going to close up, and I apologize if we weren't able to get to all of your questions. We got a lot of good ones on here. I suggest we can move this discussion over to the forum thread that I started, and again, just thank everybody. We're really pleased that everyone joined us today, and we hope this was a really good experience. So we're looking forward to hearing your feedback. And have a great day.